What's up, family? This is Kristen Smallwood, and you're listening to the Thrive with Joy podcast, a special space I've created for us to come and reason together. Each week, I share life lessons and stories that challenge our perspective on how we're managing the relationships with ourselves, God, and others. I'm even inviting some special guests to help us unpack insights on how to experience lasting, harmonious bonds that abound in grace, forgiveness, and love. Let's get into it. What's up, family? Welcome back to Season 3 of the Thrive with Joy podcast, and thank you for joining me back in the room for another episode. You know, one of the best parts of home ownership is being able to decorate and personalize your space. I always tell people my approach to decorating is to start by finding that one inspirational piece, whether it's a picture or a piece of furniture or a comforter or a rug or whatever that must-have item is that catches your eye. I typically use it to dictate how I'm going to build out the rest of the room. So I'll use it to determine what the color scheme for the room is going to be and try to find other decorations that match well with that piece. For example, when I first moved into my home and was preparing to decorate my bedroom, I found this modern black bedroom set that came with a bed, 2 nightstands, and a long dresser that I absolutely loved. I was like, oh yeah, I have got to have this set. There are so many ways I can play off this black furniture. There's so many different directions I can go in with accent colors and themes with this set. So I bought the bedroom set, and every decoration in my room was designed to complement that set. It has served me well. I've had it for years, but lately I've been thinking about just kind of getting rid of that set and redesigning the whole room because I've been having some issues with it, specifically the dresser. So I have this 6 drawer dresser with a mirror attached to it, right? And one of the drawers refuses to stay on the track. I'm talking about every time I open the drawer, instead of it sliding straight out like it's designed to do, it wobbles to the left and right until it falls completely off the track. Now, by the time I fully extended the drawer, it's now leaning forward, barely attached to the dresser. Most times I have to catch it and hold it in place with my knee in order to keep the clothes from spilling out or from hitting the ground. Have you ever had that problem? Like, maybe it's just me. I don't know. But I feel like every dresser I have ever had eventually does this. I don't know what it is. I don't know whether it's a result of me just overloading the drawers with too many clothes or me buying furniture that's just poorly constructed or has cheap material, or if it's just normal wear and tear of the furniture. But regardless of what the reason is, it used to drive me absolutely crazy. I'm talking about every time I would open that drawer, I would fuss and complain about how stupid it was that the drawer wouldn't stay on track. I couldn't understand why the designer would put such a weak design together. It just made no sense to me. So I was like, listen, I got to do something about this. I have got to fix this, right? But until I make time to actually fix it, I just need to come up with another way to open and shut the drawer while it's off the track. So after playing with it for a little bit, I figured out that if I lift the drawer by the handles before I pull it out and tilted it slightly to the right, I could pull the drawer all the way out and then sit it back on the track long enough for me to get the clothes out without it falling. Now, when I was ready to put it back in the dresser, I would lift the drawer back up on its handles, tilt it slightly to the left, push it back into the drawer, and then sit it back down on the track. Voila! I had created a whole new process. Lift, tilt, and sit. Those are my steps, and I had mastered them. I thought I was being resourceful, creative even. The drawer wasn't operating the way it was designed to, but I had created a routine that allowed me to keep using it as is. So I had gotten so used to opening the drawer this way, I was trying to open all the drawers that way, and they weren't even broken. It wasn't until one of my family members was visiting my home that I realized how abnormal my behavior with this drawer was. So we were standing in my room talking, and I went to open the drawer, and they saw me go through my lift, tilt, and sit routine. And they were like, girl, you need to fix that drawer. Like, why are you doing all that just to open that drawer? Isn't it supposed to just slide out? I was like, oh yeah, it is broken. I had gotten so comfortable with this workaround, lifting and tilting and sitting this drawer down, that I had totally forgotten that I still had a problem with this drawer. And instead of fixing the problem, I had adapted to it. And just like that, I was reminded of how easy it is for us to normalize dysfunction. Like, how did I go from being completely frustrated by this situation to embracing it as a standard part of my life? It wasn't like I didn't have the ability to fix it or even get another dresser if that was what was required. It was the fact that I had become so familiar with creating comfort in places of instability that I no longer recognized the malfunction. I started to believe that this is how the drawer was supposed to work. Now, making adjustments for how we open and close a drawer may seem like a small thing, but what happens when we take that same approach to those more severe problems in our life? You know what I'm talking about? When something in our life starts to go off track, whether it's emotionally, relationally, or spiritually, and we're bothered by it, we know it's not right. But instead of addressing the issue, we adapt to it. We create a workaround that allows us to avoid our emotions and logic and ignore that little voice that keeps telling us, you need to fix that. This isn't right. This is not how things are supposed to be. And we embrace that shaky situation until it becomes such a normal part of our day that we don't even feel the shakes anymore. It's not until someone asks us, why are you moving like that? That you even recognize that what we have accepted is not normal. So I had to ask myself, why do I do that? Why do I adjust so easily to dysfunctional situations? Like, I remember having this conversation with a lady from one of the organizations I had joined. Now, this woman was about 30 years older than me and had been with this organization for many years. She had seen people come and go. She'd experienced all kinds of changes in the organization, some good and some bad, but she was a staple of the group. Like, she didn't care what was going on. She was planted and had no intentions of going anywhere. Now, I was in one of those seasons in my life where I had a lot going on. I was being pulled in what felt like 3,000 different directions, and I just hadn't had the time to participate in the group the way I used to. Now, the group was also going through some rough patches, and everything just felt chaotic and unstable, which made it easier for me to stay away. So I showed up to an event after being missing for a couple of months. And out of nowhere, she approached me, right? She said, hey, how you been? I've been looking for you. I missed you. I thought you had left us. Now, prior to this moment, I had never even really talked to this woman. Like, whenever I saw her, I would speak to her like I did with everybody else. But we didn't do a whole lot of conversating. I knew of her. I figured she knew of me because she had seen me around. But to hear her say she missed me, it kind of threw me off a little bit. I just didn't think we had had enough interactions with each other for her to be bothered by my absence. But I said, no, ma'am, I'm still part of the group as far as I know. I just haven't been able to show up the way I'd like to with work and all these other organizations I'm involved in. And really, just life in general has had me pretty busy. So she said, I understand. I understand. I'm just glad to see that you are still with us, though. I thought you were gone. I said, no, ma'am, I'm still here. She said, good. You know what? Ain't no need for you to go nowhere anyway. At least you know the devil's here. I said, wow. Wow. I don't know what it was about that statement that has stuck with me for all these years, but I have not been able to let it go. At least you know the devil's here. That's what she said. This whole concept comes from that old saying, better the devil you know than the devil you don't. Now, I'm sure she made that statement with the best of intentions, hoping that her words would be a means of encouraging me to stay connected to that organization as long as she had, while also reminding me that no situation is perfect and I would have to face challenges regardless of where I am. So I might as well conquer the ones that are already in front of me, right? But it was something about her word choice that made me ask myself, what is she really saying to me? What message was she delivering to me in that moment that would soak into my subconscious and drive how I made decisions in the future? What patterns of behavior was she advising me to hold on to that I might come to resent later? And then it hit me. Familiar dysfunction. That's what I was learning in that moment. Whether she meant to teach me that or not, that's what I got. Her comments suggested to me that it was better to stick with the comfort of the known, no matter how unhealthy, toxic, or harmful it was, than to pursue the uncertainty of something new or potentially better. In other words, you're better off lifting, tilting, and sitting that dresser down in place every day than you would be if you took the risk of finding a new approach to make that drawer open and shut the way it was designed to. But why? Because I had already gotten used to it. I already had a routine. I knew how to make this dysfunction work. I've already accepted that this is the way things are. Why try to change now? There's safety in familiarity, right? We rarely feel threatened by things we're comfortable with because we already know how to respond to it. But because something is familiar doesn't mean that it's healthy. If you come from a family that's used to arguing and fighting with each other, you're not surprised when a fight breaks out. You anticipate it. Most time you even predict it. So when you find yourself in a conflict, by default, your initial response is to argue or fight because that is what you've always seen. Familiar dysfunction. If you're in a relationship where trust is always being broken, you're not shocked when you find out that you've been lied to again. You were just waiting to see which lie was going to be this time. How creative can they get with this one? So anytime someone tells you something, you immediately question it because you have experienced so much dishonesty. You expect everybody to lie to you now. It's familiar dysfunction. If you're in a job that you know doesn't value you, you're not confused about the fact that you didn't get that promotion. You were just waiting to confirm what you already knew, that they would overlook you again. So you put limits on what you can accomplish in that company because you know your work won't be rewarded. Familiar dysfunction. Instead of challenging these behaviors, we let them go unchecked so long that they slowly become our devils, those things that handicap us and restrict how we function and grow. Just the idea of trying to change these behaviors now feels daunting and impossible because they're so ingrained in the fiber of who we believe we are. We even use them as our excuse. This is just who I am. This is just how it is. Sometimes we adopt these behaviors as a means of survival. Doing what's familiar often feels like the only thing we can do to make it through that moment. But here's the kicker. Just because you've learned how to live with something doesn't mean you have to live with it. Change is more than possible. It's necessary. The reason why we resist change so much is because of the discomfort and uncertainty it introduces, right? The fear of the unknown leads us to assume that we will lose all power and control and end up in a worse position than we're already in. But what if that new devil or challenge you're afraid of facing is easier to fight than the one you're currently wrestling with? What if you were able to adopt a new norm that didn't require you to settle for less than what you deserve? Listen, this season, I'm on a mission to disrupt every dysfunctional area of my life. No longer will I adapt to the things that no longer serve me or stunt my growth. To help me on this journey, I've identified a couple steps that I'm committing to take to break these unhealthy but familiar patterns of dysfunction. The first step I'm committing to take is to clearly identify the areas of dysfunction in my life. I can't determine what's dysfunctional or unhealthy until I first define what healthy and functioning looks like to me. Now, this is going to look different for everybody, right? What I may view as healthy and acceptable patterns of behavior, you may disagree with. Our definition of what is healthy all boils down to what we value, whether that thing is producing the intended outcome for us and how it impacts our well being. For example, I value peace. So, a healthy situation to me is one that is void of chaos, harm, or drama. I value growth. So, a healthy situation for me is one that enables me to learn, experience, and try new things. I value respect. So, a healthy situation to me is one that makes me feel respected, heard, and considered. When it comes to intended outcomes, I expect things to work as they're designed to work. So, to me, a healthy situation shows signs of purpose, productivity, and success. The problem with all of this is we often lose sight of what we know is healthy and good for us because we fall into a routine of what has become common. Pretending like the drawer isn't broken just because I found a way to still get the clothes out of it doesn't change the fact that it's not functioning properly. So, part of my disruption process includes taking a self assessment to highlight those things that consistently misalign with what I have defined as healthy living. So, I'm having to ask myself questions like, where in my life is there brokenness that I have completely ignored or created a workaround for? What situations am I in where I am having to constantly suppress my feelings, my needs, and my desires just to appease other people? What situations am I in where I'm experiencing patterns of abuse or neglect? In what areas of my life do I have unresolved conflict that keeps resurfacing? In what areas of my life am I experiencing little to no growth? Like the hope is that by identifying these things, I can then dig into the root of why they exist and try to make the necessary changes to remove them completely. Now, the second step I'm committing to take is refusing to conform to dysfunction. Now, this mindset that says I'm better off conceding to what is commonly accepted instead of fighting for real wholeness and peace is one that I have no intentions of buying into. Just because the devil I know is familiar doesn't mean I have to relinquish my power to him. I still have a right to challenge those things that don't feel right for me and set boundaries around how I engage with others and how I let them engage with me. Now, that might look like having the courage to speak up when something's wrong instead of staying silent to keep others from feeling uncomfortable, or saying no to things that I would usually say yes to just to please other people, or refusing to shrink and downplay who I am and what I have accomplished to protect somebody else's insecurities. Like a lot of toxic environments really survive because people never leave them. Their willingness to stay in spite of the negative consequences provides just enough fuel for that devil to keep operating as he is. Sometimes the best way to set boundaries is to be bold enough to walk away. Which leads me to the last step I'm committing to take on this journey to disrupt familiar dysfunction, and that is to prioritize my growth and wholeness. Now, prioritizing growth is about initiating change and not waiting for it to happen on its own. It's about taking ownership for all the ways I contributed to the dysfunction and making intentional choices that move me closer to a healthier version of myself, even when those choices are uncomfortable, unfamiliar, or even inconvenient. Oftentimes, when we think about growth, like we tend to focus solely on the things we need to learn in order to get better. However, the older I get, the more I realize the most important step in my growth journey is unlearning stuff. You know what I'm talking about? Teaching myself to abandon habits and beliefs and traditions that have limited my choices and options. Letting go of the idea that rest equals laziness, or overextending myself makes me more valuable, or the idea that needing help makes me weak. All of these false beliefs that we have accepted with no real understanding on how they would impact our well being. This concept of sticking with the devil you know is all about avoiding risk. But when you focus on prioritizing wholeness, risks have to be taken in order to uncover greater opportunities for peace, joy, and fulfillment. Instead of avoiding risks, we need to learn how to manage them by stepping out on faith and making informed, spirit led decisions. That's really the only way to decrease anxiety and the fear that comes with the unknown. Seeking wholeness means you're fully aware of your strengths and flaws, have found a way to gain balance between the two, and can easily recognize when it's time to make a change. Listen, I never got a chance to ask that lady if she resented staying with that group for so many years. She passed away before we got a chance to talk again. I wonder if her loyalty was a result of following traditions and just accepting the status quo, or if she truly believed that that is where she was supposed to be. I guess we'll never know. What I do know is I'm upgrading my bedroom furniture and getting rid of that broken dresser drawer, okay? As I make room for something new, I'll be more aware this time, not just adjusting to what's familiar, but recognizing a defect for what it is and working to fix it instead of letting it disguise dysfunction. Disrupting dysfunction isn't about perfection. It's about awareness, intention, and growth. So no matter how many devils I face, old or new, I can't afford to settle for the path of least resistance. I must commit to the journey that leads me to optimal healing and freedom. We've been instructed to not conform to these dysfunctional patterns, but to be transformed and renewed by daring to live differently. Thank you so much for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure to share it with a friend. Post about it on social media, or feel free to leave a rating and review. And of course, follow or subscribe to the Thrive with Joy podcast on your favorite streaming platform, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, or wherever you get your podcasts, to make sure you're notified when new episodes are available. All new episodes are released on Mondays. Until next time, family, I pray that God bless you to live in peace and thrive with joy.